The case of 16-year-old Challistia Colelay remains a bizarre mystery. The Apache teen went missing in mid-October, found dead in White River a couple weeks later, now deemed a homicide by authorities. But recently, conflicting reports between Tia's family and the Bureau of Indian Affairs leave loved ones and White Mountain Apache tribal members with more questions. Let's break down what we've learned. I'm Justin Lum, and we are on the record. Major questions in the Challistia Colelay case. I'm Fox 10 investigator Justin Lum, and we're going to break it all down here. I'm joined by Special Projects executive producer George Obi, as well as Nicole, Krasean, Fox 10 reporter who has covered this case along with us. Obviously, a very tragic murder. Last time we spoke, this was all coming out as far as homicide investigation, who the suspect could be, are there any ties to other cases in the area, specifically the Emily Pike case that is now 9 months long since she was found about 45 minutes away from this area in the White River community. But here's what we know after November 14th. We got news from the family that an arrest had been made. Obviously, a huge break in the case, but then about a few hours later, the BIA said that there was no arrest that had been made. This is very rare to happen just in any community, especially when you're dealing with a high-profile case or any type of homicide, where the family says one thing, and then law enforcement comes back and says, no, they're basically wrong. I think we were all surprised at that.
Yeah. I think our biggest question was, where's the gap between the family and law enforcement if they're both telling us totally different things? And also, what family would say that there is an arrest in a case? They want an arrest more than anyone.
This happens quite a bit. One of the first questions I had for Lum when he, told me that the family had reached out and had said there'd been arrest, my first question was there an arrest made, or was there a person of interest in custody? Sometimes there's a gray area, I think, for the public, not knowing the difference, right? So if you have an individual who has been brought in for questioning, or maybe considered a suspect, whether or not they've been officially arrested and or charged is something that's like the first question that we as journalists ask. Right. Where is this person in the, as far
where
as
are they booked, charges, etc.
Exactly. In the investigative part of this, where are they at? And so I think family obviously are looking for an arrest. They want to hear about one. And whether or not that, like you said, the communication between the BIA agent and the family, was there something maybe that was misconstrued that said, look, we have somebody we're looking at, that we're talking to, and for those true crime junkies, as they know, you have a very limited amount of time to bring somebody in for questioning on a case and then officially charge them. And so the first question, again, that I had was, are they under arrest? Are they being charged? Or is this someone that they're looking at and they're trying to let the family know that we are closer to finding the person responsible?
Are they just detained for questioning? Right. But I think the family was pretty clear. I don't think they are. With something like this, to go through what they were going through, how do they just mishear something? How do they get, misled when they are face to face with someone? Why would they make up anything? So obviously that has to be frustrating for the family. And what I meant that is a rare thing is that when law enforcement and the family members of a victim are so far apart on facts, on what is fact. And obviously we do have to take importance in what law enforcement is saying, especially the investigative agency. But this is a family that's getting the information first. How would they get this wrong? So what happened?
I think also they have so many resources that are helping them. They have organizers, nonprofit leaders who are right there with them. And I feel like that, for me, heightens the understanding that they would have of what someone might be telling them. And I think if you're being told by someone, or you have someone there that's taking you through this process, this terrible process that you never wanted to or expected to go through, those people would also hopefully be able to help you understand the language that's being used and the process of getting someone for questioning versus an arrest. You would hope, at least, that would be made clearer to them.
Well, and this is a community where everybody pretty much knows everybody or knows someone who knows someone, right? And so the details that the family provided us regarding the suspect were unique in a way because they were, as we'll get into here in a minute, they alluded to the age of the person in custody, the specific that they were not known to the family or that they were not related to the family in any way. But again, this is a community where even if a name gets out there, someone's going to know someone who knows this person.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, sometimes this is how misinformation spreads in general. But in a community like this, that kind of thing can get blown way out of proportion.
A lot of people talking on social media, as we've seen, and obviously it's our job to verify these things. So if you are just following this case right now, I mean, here's what we know. The BIA confirmed this to be a homicide investigation on November 10th. Just days prior to that, there was a search in the Knots Landing area where Tia's body was found about a mile or so away from her home. She was supposed to be at a friend's house before she was reported missing in late October. And as we said, we got this statement just days ago from her family saying that law enforcement officials have confirmed the arrest of a suspect in connection with the recent homicide of Challistia Colelay. The suspect, a minor not connected to the victim's family, is now in custody. This development marks a significant step towards justice for the family. We are heartbroken and devastated by the loss of our baby girl, Tia. And while we take comfort in knowing that an arrest has been made, we recognize that the journey to healing and justice is still ongoing. We ask for privacy during this difficult time. This is not a family that talks a lot. They're not a family where you're going to get them on the phone and say, hey, what's going on? And all these details are coming out. They have been very, I would say, very informed on how to navigate this process and having advocates in front of them to, if they're going to say something, they're going to make sure what they say has purpose and it's very clear. And that's why it is very confusing as to what happened between arrest and no arrest. This was their statement, as they haven't done an on-camera interview. We've only talked to Tia's biological mom on the phone when the identity was first confirmed. Now, just hours before we got this statement, remember BIA announced the $5,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction of whoever is responsible. Meanwhile, we were waiting for any comment or statement, and I saw that you had reposted the reward. Obviously, it just seemed, okay, there's a reward out, and the family's also saying that arrest has been made. There are other suspects may be involved here.
Yeah, that was kind of our thought, was how many people are they still looking for potentially if there has been that initial person either detained or arrested? Where does the investigation lead from there?
Well, in a typical case, if you do have one suspect and you're maybe looking at others, you kind of lean on that one suspect to potentially bring in other people that may have been involved in this crime. Again, all of it's very hypothetical, but when you read the statement from the family, the two words that stick out is suspect, right, in custody. Again, that means there's been no arrest, no charges, but they have someone in custody. So there may have been a time when they brought that person in, I think it was late Wednesday or Thursday of last week, and then you have the family going, okay, is this the beginning to the end of finally getting some closure? Because here we are a month. Today would be the month anniversary, if you will, or
of when she left.
30 days from when she disappeared. And so a lot of emotion for the family. They obviously want to find out who's responsible. I can only imagine what they were thinking when they learned Friday night BIA's statement after all of this, finding out that no arrests have been made, and we're still unclear from BIA's perspective, where is this juvenile? We've been led to believe they've been released. Again, no one's been arrested or charged. So where is this minor? And
who is this person that exists? Why would they say this person exists and they don't?
And how did they learn about this person?
Yeah.
I know you reached out to find out how many tips they've received just within the last week or so.
And I'm sure it's already in the hundreds, not thousands, right? Like we said, this community is talking a lot. It's very tight-knit. People know people. And so I think the family would be not just confused, but frustrated because they live in this area and there are suspects who remain free, suspects who remain free. Now, at 4:45 p.m. that same day that we got the statement from the family, that's when BIA said they had not made any arrests in the case and that this remains active and ongoing. The BIA, Fort Apache Agency, and White Mountain Apache Tribal Police are continuing to investigate this case to bring closure to Challistia Colelay's family and community and justice to those responsible. So obviously, this gap between law enforcement and the family. Meanwhile, it has been 9 months since Emily Pike's remains were found on Valentine's Day just outside of Globe off the US 60, and her body was dismembered after she went missing from her Mesa group home in January. And obviously, we're hearing from all these tribal members that they want, or they think there's an inkling that there's a connection. Obviously, that's up to law enforcement to prove if there is. But of course, it does make you wonder, right, what is happening. This is 45 minutes apart. And I think it's important to remember that it has been 9 months since that case broke out.
And we have not seen any steady leads
updates
that have really come through. And last week when I was in Globe for a separate story, you passed by the reward poster for Emily. It's still listed at $75,000 when we know that that's been grown to $200,000. So it makes you wonder who's responsible for just updating the public on that kind of basic knowledge that could push someone to come forward. The information we're getting on that case very limited as well.
It just like trickles out, and it's frustrating for us as press because we want answers, want information, we want that constant. I can pick up the phone and call this spokesperson, this PIO. But for Gila County Sheriff's Office leading the Emily Pike investigation, I believe it's a lieutenant or someone who's on duty as a basically law enforcement officer who acts as a PIO and is not always going to get back to you. And then in this case with White Mountain Apache Police, we left several voicemails.
Nothing.
You have, I have, we have not heard one thing back. So you're lucky to get someone on the phone, and it's most likely someone who's in the administrative office department who transfers you to a voicemail. And our only channel is the BIA. So you're not going to get that swift response like you would get, just for example, in the Valley from Phoenix Police.
Well, and I think this underscores the importance of an agency like BIA to help, as you mentioned, a department like White Mountain Apache, where they are limited on personnel and resources. And for those watching, it is important to remember that both of these agencies want to catch whoever is responsible for these crimes, right? Not just this latest case, but I think Emily Pike's case specifically. The amount of media coverage and the amount of people who are posting and putting out flyers and trying to get information on the case, that is very important. And the statement that we got Friday from BIA following all of this, I think reinforces that, look, while they may not have made an arrest or made any charges against this individual or anybody, the fact that they're still looking and they're still looking for tips, they've increased the reward. We've seen this with Emily Pike's case. The reward has been increased.
A massive reward.
Increase, yeah.
That's huge.
And that it helps generate tips and leads. But on the fallback, I think you have two families, particularly with these two cases, that would love to hear something. And because they are dealing with smaller agencies, and then, of course, the BIA, because the BIA, again, is handling both of these cases, the lack of transparency can be very frustrating. We don't see it as much in some of these bigger cities here in the Valley. I don't know if they're any closer to it. They're obviously not going to tip their hand because they don't want any other potential suspects to learn that they may be on the case and then for them to flee. But,
and that's got to be widely known that this is now a national story, and it should be. And I'm glad that we aren't just covering it within our daily newscast, but we're here opening up the forum and talking about this in depth because there has been so much public interest in this. Because why is this 16-year-old who's gone to a friend's house just found dead weeks later? And what was, we talked about it on our last episode, what was the response? Obviously, the criteria wasn't met for turquoise alert, but what did the investigative agency at the time of a missing persons report, White Mountain Apache Police, what was done to exhaust all local resources? And I'm sure it would be frustrating for any family going through that. And you can see how the case with Emily Pike has grown because you have Gila County Sheriff's Office, I believe BIA and FBI. and then you have San Carlos Apache Police. There's a lot going on, and then so the communication, I think it gets even more cloudy, and who's handling this, who handles that part of it.
And this case, we have been told that the FBI is not formally involved yet, which is different from Emily's case.
Which we automatically assume because this is a tribal member who's the victim of a homicide that FBI's involved. And Fox 10 did speak with retired FBI Special Agent James Eggleston, and he says he expects that to happen at some point. Take a listen.
So in this case, with Tia's disappearance and death being ruled a homicide, I certainly hope that the FBI is very involved in this investigation, especially considering the ongoing investigation of Emily Pike's homicide. Here we have two young ladies, both from the Native American community, who were apparently abducted or lured into a situation in close proximity to each other, and then their bodies were discovered not too far apart from each other.
And of course, we've checked in with FBI Phoenix, and according to a spokesperson, FBI is not involved at this point. Like we said, this case is under the jurisdiction of White Mountain Apache Police and BIA, and we were told that they're not even assisting. But literally, the spokesperson said, could it change down the road? They said, sure, but not right now. I just think it's interesting why either they've been told to back off or I don't know what's the disconnect.
Yeah, it's a big question mark, because you would think that, as the retired agent said over the weekend, these cases, while it's very hypothetical to connect them, they are similar in a lot of ways that you would hope that the FBI would also be called in to help with the 16-year-old girl when we just had a 14-year-old girl 9 months ago. We don't know the details of Tia's death in terms of, cause of death, things like that have not been released to connect anything like that. Mm-hmm. But it is an ongoing conversation across the country, too, about missing and murdered Indigenous women, children, people in general from tribal land. And so to have two of those happen so close together, we were told it was a 45-minute drive between the mile marker where Emily was found and the White River neighborhood where Tia was found. And less than a mile from her home, going back to the resources that are exhausted, it's a very... you're out in the wilderness up there. It's a beautiful part of the state, but it's also, there's a lot of places that would be difficult to search. But if you know you have a 16-year-old girl who is in this area, and then you end up finding her less than a mile from her home, you wonder what kind of search parties were potentially deployed, or if that was even discussed.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is, again, a case where how much evidence was lost. I think Emily Pike's case, same thing, is you have a rural scene and how much they could collect at the time, which would explain them going back out a week or two later, searching, 2 weeks ago in that same area. I looked it up this morning. We talk about the cooperation between some of these federal agencies. It was back in April when the Justice Department announced Operation Not Forgotten, that they were going to provide a lot of these Indian communities with resources from the FBI. But in April, they said it was a 6-month operation. If you do the math, their cooperation would have ended at the end of October. Right. So the timing, I think, couldn't have been worse if, in fact, that the cooperation ended at that time, when you still have two, at least locally, two very high-profile cases, underage girls found murdered. Look, if the BIA or White Mountain reached out to the FBI, I'm sure they would be more than happy to help provide any sort of resources they needed. So you do wonder how much they are reaching out. Right. And hopefully that does not get in the way of potentially processing some evidence that the FBI would have the tools to do that could help you kind of maybe crack this case or lead you in a certain direction. Because, look, I don't know where they're headed. I don't know if they have a good lead on Tia's murder, but because of the fact that we're only a month into this, that hopefully those leads don't start to dry up. I am concerned that the Emily Pike leads are beginning to dry up a little bit. They haven't made any sort of indication of no updates. No surveillance video.
Interest,
no DNA. DNA would have come back. Toxicology would have come back by now. But the longer, as you know, again, true crime junkies know, the longer that this plays out, the smaller that window gets in hunting down any potential leads.
And what is Gila County Sheriff's Office really going to put out into the media? I know that the last time we had talked to them as we were working on our Runaway Teen special, they said that they were waiting on DNA evidence to come back from the lab, and you would think that was way quicker, but there is such a forensic process, and obviously how she was found. We know so much more now about Emily's case than we do about Tia's case, because we don't know exactly how she was found and then what was discovered in that search just about 5 days after her body was found. So there's still so many questions, and you do bring up that fascinating point about this operation ending in October, and now FBI is saying, well, we're not even involved in this. BIA's got it. We're not touching it. And you can't help but think about any correlation between these two girls. But BIA has heard that noise, and they said that at this time there's no indication or evidence to suggest that this case is connected to a serial offender. However, investigators are approaching this case with thoroughness and objectivity, considering all possibilities as they actively pursue all investigative leads. So with this lengthy statement we got that seemed very fluffed up, trying to read between the lines, obviously, clearly, and not jump to conclusions, but trying to look at the wording. I mean, this took them hours to put together, but they definitely know that people are asking, could these be connected? Obviously, Emily was found weeks after going missing. Same thing with Tia, found weeks after going missing, just from different places in the area. And what we don't know is this one person responsible or multiple suspects in the exact condition of how she was found?
Yeah. And I think that it'll be a while before we get any more information. I think that they think that statement is going to keep us at bay for a little while, probably by giving all of that they said on Friday. But I think asking about the tips is a great question. And I also think there's a question out there of, talking about the Operation Not Forgotten and what kind of resources were deployed during that 6-month period. Could you give us some examples of what could have maybe been used in Emily's case?
As far as any other cases,
was it productive?
Yes, exactly.
Was it productive? We'd love to know.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the elephant in the room for some of these folks in this community is, look, the amount of distrust, and I read a lot of the comments on the posts, social media, is I think kind of opens that window to what is the community feeling and thinking. And based on that, there's obviously a lot of mistrust with at least White Mountain Apache Police Department and some of the issues they've had over the last couple of years. And so I think from a community perspective, that is part of it. It's one thing, look, they're frustrated because you have these young girls being targeted and obviously ending up dead, and you want to know who's responsible. But then the community feels like, how much can they trust these local agencies to investigate? You hear cases about this all the time, whether it's false arrest, targeting, things like that. And then the worst case scenario is you have these young girls ending up dead. And I think the community is, if you read between the lines, they don't have a lot of trust in some of these local agencies. So you would hope, at least from the community's perspective, that they are reaching out to, BIA, or they are reaching out to FBI in the amount of time in order to get some of these cases investigated properly. Because as this distrust grows, the noise level is only going to go up. Yeah. And I know we'll have it. We'll learn more this weekend, but there is going to be a march. Right, the family of Tia's is going to march on Saturday, and then they have another vigil celebration of life planned for her December 1st. And you hope that some of these events and some of these things, again, kind of bring more attention to these cases, because that's what we need, right? Like you said, we don't need to kind of, especially as the media and as journalists, we don't need to turn a blind eye. And just because, law enforcement's like, look, we're kind of back to square one. I think the more attention you can bring to these cases, the better. And I think the community would agree with that.
And I think we should be seeing law enforcement officers and investigators, whether it's obvious who they are or not, at these events, because they should be taking notes. They should be involved in whatever the community is doing, even closely related. You go to walks. There was a walk for Emily around the summertime and downtown Phoenix, and you go there and you see the normal people, but you aren't seeing necessarily people that are coming from outside communities. And that's what you need too, is the outside community to join in as well and to continue to raise awareness, because at the heart of it is this girl, two girls, but now talking about Tia, that's gone now, and her family's trying to navigate it. And we're here to help them, but they they have a lot on their plate right now.
In December, she will be 17, so that coincides with this vigil on December 1st. Like you talked about, the march, I think the noise and the distrust, it reaches a boiling point, and it's probably hit that many times in the past decades. I mean, you think about the history of how things happen on tribal communities, and then it sort of dissipates, and then it bubbles up again and boils. So it's not just White Mountain Apache Police, but other agencies across Arizona on tribal land. But I mean, it's clear as day when comments are disabled on the Facebook page for White Mountain. That says a lot, and everybody's still going to say how they feel and give their opinion. For everybody wondering, if you don't know how to provide tips, on the screen is the BIA Missing and Murdered Unit hotline, 833-560-2065, or you can email OJS_MMU@BIA.gov, or texting very simply BIA MMU to 847411. Thank you guys for discussing this again. It's important. It's important to us, and we're going to make it important to our newsroom as we continue to cover Tia's case. We'll be sure to update all of our Fox 10 Phoenix platforms with any new developments. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. See you next time on The Record.